Hello and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go around the Motor City. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jarrett Stays. It's Tuesday, December 17th, 2019.
On today's show, Ford has announced a big investment in Metro Detroit. Jer went down to the new Detroit Pistons facility to see their new rocket fiber broadcast studio. And then Fletcher Sharpe joins me to talk all about the Pistons on the court, Detroit City FC, and a crazy little rumor about those lowly Lions.
All of that after we tell you that our show this week is brought to you in part by the Sleigh Ball. It's a winter dance party this Saturday night featuring Raven from RuPaul's Drag Race and an ensemble of local drag queens and DJs. The event takes place at St. Andrew's Hall and doors open up at 9 p.m. The party goes on all night. And Daily Detroit listeners get a discount. Use code DailyDetroit25 to get 25% off regular or VIP tickets to this event. There will be a link in the show notes or visit facebook.com/hardtopdetroit for more information. All right, first up, big news out of Ford Motor Company to talk about today. There was $1.45 billion, yes, billion dollars with a B, invested in two plants. This was an announcement made, and it's going to cover two in Metro Detroit, specifically $750 million for Michigan Assembly down in Wayne, $700 million for the plant in Dearborn. It's going to mean 3,000 jobs across the board. 2,700 of them in Wayne, 300 in Dearborn. In Wayne, they're going to build this new Bronco, the new Ranger, a bunch of other stuff. Dearborn, the F-150, that's the workhorse. And, you know, all of this is going to start hiring in 2020. First off, I mean, Sven, I want to talk about this for a bit because these are some product names we've heard before, right? But they haven't been out for a while.
That's correct. Bronco hasn't been out since, I think, the 90s, if I'm not mistaken. This is sort of like considered by many people kind of like one of the OG SUVs, you know, off-road SUVs, big boxy, kind of helped define the genre before it really was a thing. But it's been defunct for many years. They're through, I don't know, leaks, basically, going back a year or more now. Ford has more or less, you know, spilled the beans that it is developing an all-new Bronco. Supposed to become a 2020 model, which would mean that we should be seeing an official unveiling of it pretty soon. You know, in a normal year, you would have probably thought that that would make it a prime candidate for like the Detroit Auto Show, the North American International Auto Show in January, but that, of course, has been moved to June, so that might prevent that. You might see Ford do a standalone event. We'll see, but, you know, this is going to be Ford's answer to the Jeep Wrangler, you know, an off-road capable SUV, definitely on the smaller side. The previous SUVs were two-door models. We'll see whether they keep that. There have been a lot of spy shots. I mean, as you know, I write for Autoblog, and I know we've run a lot of spy shots on things believed to be the Ford Bronco, but it's all been really in flux, and I don't think there's been any really good concrete views of what this car is going to look like yet.
Well, and Ford's betting very big on SUVs and trucks, and it's interesting of note to see them invest in the Ranger and then also, of course, the F-150, which is their cash cow. Yeah,
right. Well, and they're doing this by design, as all the Detroit automakers are. SUVs and trucks are content rich. People tend to, you know, trick them out. And
that sounds like automotive talk to me. Content rich.
Well, what I mean is that they spec them out. You know, they order lots of fancy packages and higher trim levels, which really fatten the profits for the automakers. So automakers love them because they make lots of money on them. I think you called them kind of their bread and butter. And they're doing this to kind of stockpile cash because they need a lot of it to start developing electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, the things that everybody thinks, you know, are going to define the future and that cost a lot of money, frankly. And going back to the Ford Ranger too, Ford reintroduced the Ranger, another one of its legacy small pickup trucks, as a 2019 model. So this new announcement apparently is an all-new Ranger. Not clear what exactly they mean by that. I mean, it's 2 years is, you know, pretty short period of time to introduce a major, you know, new generation on a car, and automakers usually let them run a little bit longer than that. And but the Ranger's been pretty well received. I actually got to ride in one of them. This was back last fall, before it had technically gone on sale. I covered a Ford event out in Las Vegas, and they took us out to the track where they let us take rides in the new Ranger on a kind of an off-road simulated course in a parking lot of the motor speedway there, and to show off the features like when you're one of the wheels is off the ground, if you're on uneven terrain, it can redirect the torque to the three wheels that have traction and
Oh, wow.
fancy things like that. So it's loaded with all kinds of nifty off-road features, which is another thing. I mean, we're talking about two off-road vehicles here. Automakers are really big these days on emphasizing the off-road features of their SUVs and their trucks, which always begs the question, who exactly are taking these things off-road? I mean, it's kind of like all-wheel drive. Like, a lot of people flock to these things, even though few of them need it or use it, actually.
Well, I feel like that's kind of like the whole status thing, right? Like, why was the Hummer so popular? Why were all these other things so popular?
Exactly.
I mean, in reality, I feel like for most folks, something like a station wagon would be much more practical, but you see how well station wagons do here in this country.
That's right.
All right, and to close it off, one thing I want to mention real quick is that Wayne is going to have an autonomous service and modification wing as part of their large facility there for Michigan assembly. And I think that's also a really interesting move because you're starting to see the factories make that switch over to that kind of propulsion and that kind of like set. And I think that's interesting that it's here.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens there. Ford, of course, is devoting much of its new kind of emerging campus in Corktown in Detroit to autonomous vehicles alongside electric vehicle development. I think that technology is still further away than I think a lot of people originally had anticipated. And I think even, people like Jim Hackett, the Ford CEO, would admit as much. I don't think that this means that they're going to start, mass producing these cars in significant volumes, but it's coming, no question about that. And I think, you're going to start seeing them produce them in sort of smaller quantities. And, we could see some of those sort of, out on the streets here in Detroit testing along with their Argo AI subsidiary that they bought a couple years ago. All right, Jer, so you headed down earlier today to they're calling it the Techtown neighborhood now?
Yeah, I guess that's a new thing. I mean, to me, it's always kind of like New Center and then Midtown, but I guess officially now they've kind of wedged in this thing called Techtown, kind of where Henry Ford's headquarters is and where Techtown and there's a bunch of lofts in there and everything.
Kind of some
Next
Wayne
Energy
State satellite buildings now, I think.
Yeah,
that new integrative biosciences building is up there.
Yeah. All these fancy things that are somewhat technology related, they now call Techtown, and gives you an idea. It's like a little bit south of Grant Boulevard.
Anyway, you were there to see sportsball technology in the form of the new Pistons training facility, the practice facility. They've got some new broadcast media studios. What's this all about?
Yeah, I wanted to check it out. Admittedly, it's personally interesting because I spent quite a few years over the years in television studios. I have a background in TV journalism, and it was really interesting to see how things have evolved and changed, and also that they're really doing a pretty big investment in media right here in Detroit because up until just a few months...
At least somebody is, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Up until like very recently, they were actually still running all of their Pistons media operations out of the Palace in Auburn Hills because they had so much gear and everything that they had to do. So just imagine how big of a mess that was. So it turns out that Rocket Fiber has bought the naming rights to their studio and connectivity. The CEO, Mark Hudson, who, full disclosure, I've known him for a few years, he talked to me about it and said that it was, in his opinion, the most connected practice facility in the entire NBA as far as technology goes. And that's with like two 10 gigabit lines and a bunch of other stuff. But what I found interesting was just how much content is being produced out of there. They have a studio, saw Matt Derry, he's a popular
long-time
voice.
Sports broadcaster.
Sports guy, yep. And just how much content and how big of a deal sports really is, not just in Detroit, but Metro Detroit, and seeing like just this hive of activity, really cool stuff. The integrated basketball court, studios right there. So if they're not practicing, you can actually see into the court and all that stuff. It's also really cool too, because whether it is the for public or the open to the public meeting rooms or the broadcast studio, everything kind of see into the practice area. And then the basketball operations people can hit a button and the curtains come down like James Bond and blocks you from seeing the court. It's amazing.
Ooh, neat. And I hear that they're maybe also branching into podcasting a little bit up there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have specific plans, but I do know that they're doing more podcasts. They're doing more just television and streaming in general. They have more than 20 different channels that they feed out of that facility for the Pistons, and they're just looking at all kinds of different options to get the word out about the team. I think a lot of people forget that so much of sports media is actually team controlled and actually produced by the team itself. And a lot of times your sportscasters and things like that, they're actually employees of the club.
And so this facility, though, is up and running now. Are they actually using it as their primary media broadcast studio now?
Yep, it's good to go. It's interesting because they have direct connectivity to LCA, which is really
Little Caesars Arena.
Little Caesars Arena, which is important for them because LCA was really built as the home of the Red Wings. And the Pistons, I mean, let's just be honest, it was kind of an add-on, right?
Yeah.
Like it's still to this day, I think, feels more like a Red Wings facility than a Pistons facility. So having that connectivity is really important for them to have their base of operations. It also has direct connections through the facility to the league. And then they're also using a giant data cloud from Microsoft. So they actually have a direct link to Chicago as well, so that they can get all of these huge files. Because if you're dealing with video and audio, these files are really big. This is not sending like Word documents.
The Detroit Pistons dropped a home game in embarrassing fashion, 133-119 to the woeful Washington Wizards. This after defeating the Houston Rockets in Houston on Saturday night. Joining us to talk all about that and a couple other tidbits of sports news is Fletcher Sharpe. Fletcher, 133 points is a lot of points to give up to a team that has a losing record. What gives?
Not having Andre Drummond really kind of hurts them on the defensive side. They don't have a rim protector. Also, it kind of means Thon Maker has to play way more minutes. And as you've probably heard and everyone else has heard how I feel about Thon Maker, that's not a winning formula for the Pistons. So I don't really know what to tell you.
But they were out. Drummond was out, 2 nights before in Houston.
Yeah, well, the difference with that is the Rockets were also missing Russell Westbrook and a few other players. And not to say that Russell Westbrook is like the game changer for them, but if you put the ball in James Harden's hands enough nights, he will shoot you out of a game. Even as great as he is as a player, let's not forget the last time that we saw them in the playoffs. They blew a game by missing a consecutive 27 three-pointers, and he was the main culprit missing most of them.
Wanted to mention that Andre Drummond is out with an eye issue related to an allergic reaction he had to eating avocados while he was in Mexico, which I think is kind of an amazing little anecdote there. What's the prognosis for both him and Blake Griffin, who's also been out? When are they expected to return to the lineup?
Andre Drummond, I'm not sure. Honestly, more to that, I feel like if you get an infection from eating an avocado, you know that you're allergic to them. And maybe he ate something that didn't know had avocado in it. But, that's really not a good look for you. Maybe not even talking about sports, but it's not a good look for... I'm allergic to seafood. I would never eat something that had seafood in it because I know that I would swell up. As for Blake... Honestly, I'm not sure when he'll be back, but I think he should sit for a bit longer, even if he is good enough to go, quote unquote, because he's looked really, really like a shell of himself most of the season. And I'd rather him come back 100% healthy than him come back 80% and then get hurt again and be pushed even further back. If the Pistons want to try to make the playoffs, that's not going to be the way to do it. Don't keep rushing him back and hoping that, he doesn't break down because he's nearing the end of his NBA career.
So the Pistons are next in action on Wednesday when they host the Toronto Raptors, the defending NBA champions, excuse me. Fletcher, let's shift gears to soccer. Detroit City FC last week announced a new head coach for its women's team, which kicks off play in the spring. Sam Piraine is the new head coach. What do we know about him, Fletcher?
Salvatore Sam Piraine. I know him not from women's soccer, but when Michigan Stars first went from being FC Sparta Michigan, the first time were Spartans FC, then they became FC Sparta Michigan, then they became Michigan Stars FC, now they're Michigan Stars SC. But when they first made the name change, they hired him as a coach when they were trying to redo everything. He used to work with the Dearborn Stars, which are one of the more prolific Michigan Premier Soccer League sides. They actually made it to the U.S. Open Cup proper, second round, which means since they're not a part of a national league, they qualified all the way from the regionals. So they played, I think, a total of 8 or 7 games that tournament just to make it to the proper round. They lost to the Dayton Dutch Lions, which also used to feature a Michigan player, Joel DeLass, from the upper part of Michigan. But he's a really good tactical coach. Nothing super special. But I do know after his first season with Michigan Stars, he walked away from the program because he's like, I want nothing to do with this program. So he knows right from wrong. He understands how to properly run an organization. If it's not going to work, he would not be a part of it. So the fact that Detroit City finally brought him in lets me know that at least he has his head on straight. Tactically, I'm not sure how he's going to fare in the women's league. I do know that Lansing, as of late, has kind of run the women's league. So if you really want to go to the championship or to the regional finals, it goes through Lansing. I feel like he has the right head to do that if he wants to try to take them to that level.
How have the supporters reacted to his hiring?
Pretty good. Normally, people hear about people being a part of other teams in the league and they kind of grumble. But once they become part of Detroit City, all that's forgiven. There are plenty of players, for example, who played for Stars, played for Ann Arbor, who are now like fan favorites. So yeah, hearing that he's coming from the Stars even after a break to come to Detroit, people are like, we can look past the years before as long as you deliver for us now.
And I should mention DCFC will be conducting tryouts for the new women's team in January. Also last week, staying on Detroit City FC, U.S. Soccer, the national governing board for the sport, approved DCFC and the Michigan Stars to play professionally in the National Independent Soccer Association, or NISA. Anything jump out at you about that, Fletcher?
It validates that they're officially a professional team now. This last year, they kind of were professional, quote unquote. They were playing a professional schedule. They were using some professional players, but they were not really a part of the professional league. But now they've been officially added to NISA, officially validated by the USSF. Now they're officially in the professional ranks, Detroit City and the Stars. And now we'll get to see some professional outdoor soccer games in the state of Michigan, which is really good to see.
Yeah. And finally, going from Michigan's best sporting team franchise, professional sports team franchise, to its worst, there's a rumor floating around that Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos will be buying the Detroit Lions sometime in 2020. Since we planned this call, Fletcher, we just got news that from the Lions organization that they're bringing back GM Bob Quinn and head coach Matt Patricia for yet another year of futility. What do you make of this Jeff Bezos rumor, though?
The Fords won't sell. You'll have to literally wait for all the Fords to die before they sell. But if they were to sell to Jeff Bezos, who has an immense amount of money to ask for, I feel like it's a chance for the Lions maybe to be moved from Detroit. And the reason why I think that is had Amazon come to Detroit and actually stayed in Detroit and something was built here for them,
for HQ2,
I would totally believe like, yep, all right, he has a reason to be here. But because he tried to get Amazon here and Detroit very much pushed back and we were like, great, he's not here, he might could potentially just be petty and say, you know what, that's cool, I'm going to come here for a year and I'm going to look for somewhere else to take this team. And honestly, say for the diehard like Lions fans, I don't really see who would be bothered so much. There are people who've been clamoring for like, can we get the Lions to stop playing at Thanksgiving? And like they play for Thanksgiving forever. That's like a staple of Thanksgiving tradition.
Yep.
Get some turkey, get some macaroni and cheese, get some greens, watch the Lions potentially get blown out. If there are people who are willing to give up that tradition, I guess they don't really want the team here. And if that's the case, like Jeff Bezos would be the person to do that because he has enough money to buy them, has enough money to take them somewhere, and he has enough, I guess, persuasion to actually get people to want to listen to him about a stadium idea. You know, I don't know, but I don't see it even happening because I don't see the Fords selling. I think the Fords are going to cling to the Lions until like the NFL stops being a thing.
All right. Fletcher Sharpe is our sports correspondent. You can find him at tellusdetroit.com. Fletcher, thanks so much, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I got to pop up because bold take, man. Like, people are like, we want Jeff Bezos to save us. And then all of a sudden, Fletch is like, yeah, Jeff Bezos will buy the team and then just move it away. That's ice cold. Ice cold.
Well, I mean, he could do that, or he could buy the team. I mean, this is all assuming he does it. He could buy the team and do like he did with the Washington Post and keep it there and invest in it. I mean, stranger things have happened, right? I mean, Detroit would be attractive to a person like Jeff Bezos because it's a big sports town, right? That's a pretty big media market. Like there's a lot of money to be made here as an owner of an NFL franchise, no question about that.
Well, and the Lions, considering the amount of love for sports, they consistently rank near the bottom of value for NFL teams, like for team value. So
that's because they suck,
right? They could only go up from here. So like, there's a good chance it could be a lot more. I, for one, I mean, I got to tell you, I am not that I should be disappointed because I expect mediocrity now from the Lions organization, but
witness that announcement that just came over that
literally just
that they're
came
keeping the general manager and head coach.
Yeah, Bob.
I mean, ugh.
Well, and you started to see it with, and I was glad to see this. You're starting to see it with the crowd not showing up to the game.
Yeah.
But like,
we need more of that if they're going to affect any kind of change.
But maybe they won't, because you know what, like it feels like the Fords are going to do what the Fords are going to do, like that wing of the family with the team. I don't see the way forward here. Like I saw this press thing that came through the Lions organization, and it read to me like excuses. And winners come up with like reasons to win, and they put it on themselves and say, all right, we didn't win, we're going to figure out a way to do it. This was like, well, there was injuries and this and this and this. Losers make excuses. Like losers make excuses for why they can't do something. And the Lions for years has been a losing organization. And I love the Lions. I want the Lions to do well, but like I think we're living in some kind of sports fantasy land that our teams right now aren't dumpster fires.
I just, you talking about excuses, that announcement that just came over today was full of excuses about why the team, has sunk to what do they want 2 games this year, 3 games they've won this year, I think.
Yeah. And then they've been on a continuous streak of losing.
I fail to see the point of the Lions anymore. I just don't understand the point of caring about them, because the team ownership doesn't care about the Lions. They don't care about winning. They don't care about their fans. They're just in it to make their cheap money, play nice with Roger Goodell in the NFL, and collect their paycheck. I just don't understand the point of the Lions. There's just there's nothing about them could convince me to become a fan, unless they started winning, of course.
Alrighty, thanks for listening. Special thanks to one of our members that upped their pledge by 25 times today on a monthly basis. Like 25x. I can't even. Thank you. Many claps. Thank you so much. You members are amazing and make sure that we can do this thing. Also huge, we have been jumping up on the daily podcast charts on Apple Podcasts. Sven, we ranked above CNN, Politico, and like a bunch of others, and everybody above us in the charts, and that's getting to be a much smaller group. They're all like giant media organizations with like buckets of money.
It's crazy to me. I still pinch myself all the time. I mean, it's like we said when we were out having a drink in Hamtramck the other night with our friend Mickey, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I was telling her about going to Belarus, and she said, you guys got invited to Belarus of all the media outlets in town? And I said, I know. I pinched myself too. I can't even explain it, but it happened, and I'm going to take it, of course. But listen, it all just goes back to how important it is, the importance of supporting local media, because everybody who pays attention knows that the news business is in disarray. Funding models have just been, they're just imploding, and supporting creators who are in the community, of the community, and care about the community is super important if we want to, retain the things that we like to listen to. And so thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. We couldn't do this without you. It's helping us buy Christmas presents for our family and friends. And go to patreon.com/dailydetroit.
Yes, and thank you. With that, I'm Jared Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.